Imam Khalid was the heart of his community. For nearly 2 decades, his voice echoed through the walls of the mosque, calling the faithful to prayer, delivering sermons, and guiding his people through the teachings of the Quran. To his congregation, Khalid was more than a religious leader. He was a symbol of unwavering devotion, a steady hand in a world often marked by uncertainty. But beneath the surface, Khalid carried doubts he dared not voice. There were nights when, after leading the final prayer and retreating to his modest home, he would sit alone in the quiet of his study, staring at the pages of the Quran, seeking answers to questions he could not silence. Is this truly the path to God's love? Am I leading these people towards salvation, or am I as lost as they are? These thoughts gnawed at him, though he quickly buried them, convincing himself they were whispers of weakness. Khalid's life revolved around routine. Morning prayers, scripture study, counseling sessions, and evening gatherings with other imams filled his days. His wife, Amina, and his young daughter, Rama, grounded him. Yet even in their presence, Khalid felt a strange emptiness, a longing for something he couldn't name. He prayed more fervently, hoping that devotion would fill the void. On the surface, Khalid's world was serene, structured, and deeply rooted in tradition. Yet his spirit was restless, caught in an unseen battle between faith and doubt. It was this inner conflict that set the stage for a journey he could never have anticipated, a journey that would shatter his beliefs, transform his identity, and lead him to an encounter with a truth that would change everything. If you're intrigued by this extraordinary story, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. This is only the beginning. My name is Khalid, and for as long as I can remember, I have been a servant of my faith. I was raised to love God, honor His word, and lead others in doing the same. Becoming an imam felt like my purpose in life, something I was born to do. For years, I poured my heart into it. I led prayers, counseled my community, and taught the words of the Quran to those seeking guidance. I believed I was fulfilling God's will. But deep inside, there was always a nagging emptiness, a question I couldn't shake. Was this truly the path to God? I never dared voice such doubts, not even to Amina, my wife, who has always been a picture of faith and devotion. But on the nights when the house was quiet and I was left alone with my thoughts, I found myself staring at the stars, asking God to show me something more. Then, one ordinary day, everything changed. It started like any other morning. I woke before dawn, prepared for Fajr prayer, and made my way to the mosque. The congregation was small that day, just a handful of familiar faces. I delivered my usual sermon, nothing out of the ordinary. But as I was returning home, a sharp pain shot through my chest. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before, a searing, crushing sensation that left me gasping for air. I barely made it to my doorstep before collapsing. I remember Amina's screams and the blurry faces of my neighbors rushing to help, and then darkness. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I was standing in an endless void, weightless and alone. The silence was deafening, yet I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. It was as if every fear I'd ever buried was laid bare before me. And then out of the darkness came light. It wasn't like sunlight, but something purer, warmer. It enveloped me, and for the first time in what felt like eternity, I felt peace. In the midst of the light, I saw a figure. At first, I thought it must be an angel, but as he stepped closer, I realized this was no ordinary being. He looked at me, not just at me, but into me, as though he could see every part of my soul. His gaze wasn't condemning or harsh. It was filled with a love so profound, I didn't know how to respond. Before I could speak, he said, "Khalid, I am the way, the truth, and the life." I froze. His words struck me like thunder. I recognized them, not from the Quran, but from something I'd dismissed as heretical in my teachings. It was the voice of Jesus. I wanted to argue, to protest, but I couldn't. In his presence, my doubts and defenses melted away. I was overwhelmed by the realization that everything I thought I knew about God, about salvation, was incomplete. I felt an immense sorrow for the years I had spent pursuing what I now saw as shadows. And then, just as quickly as it began, it was over. I awoke in a hospital bed, gasping for air, with Amina and Rama by my side. The doctors told me I had suffered a heart attack and was clinically dead for nearly 4 minutes. But those 4 minutes felt like an eternity. a sacred eternity that had reshaped my very being. I tried to focus on the relief of being alive, but the encounter lingered, as vivid as if it were still happening. I couldn't stop replaying his words in my mind. I am the way, the truth, and the life. What did it mean for someone like me, a devout imam, to hear such words? Little did I know, that moment marked the beginning of a journey that would cost me everything I thought I knew, and lead me to a truth I could no longer deny. I didn't know what to do with what had happened. The moment I woke up in that hospital bed, I felt like I had been given a second chance, but I wasn't sure what it meant. I wasn't sure how to process it. I spent the following days in a fog, my body recovering from the heart attack, but my mind racing with confusion. How could I reconcile the man I had been, the imam who had taught others with conviction, with what I now knew in the deepest part of my soul? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, Jesus. The warmth of his presence still lingered, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I had encountered something real, something profound. But the implications terrified me. If I embraced this truth, it would mean everything I had built my life around would be torn apart. My faith, my position, my identity, it would all come crumbling down. Amina was the first to notice the change in me. She could always tell when something was wrong, even when I tried to hide it. One evening, after I had spent hours staring out the window, lost in thought, she finally confronted me. "Khalid," she said, her voice soft but firm, "what is happening to you? You're not the same." I looked at her, the love of my life, and felt the weight of the moment. "I don't know how to explain it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I've seen the truth. I've met Jesus." Her face froze. For a moment, I thought I had imagined the shock that flashed across her features. "What do you mean you've met Jesus?" Her voice trembled as she repeated the words. I could see the fear in her eyes, and in that moment, I knew she was not prepared for this. She didn't understand, and I didn't have the words to make her see. I tried to explain the peace, the overwhelming love I felt, but it was as if I was speaking a different language. "Khalid," she said, her voice shaking, "this is madness. You're talking about leaving everything we've known." The words hit me like a blow, but they also felt true. I had already begun to question everything. What had I spent my life teaching? Was it wrong? Was I wrong? Over the next few days, the doubt in my heart grew stronger. I found myself in conflict with everything I had ever believed. I would kneel in prayer, but it felt empty. The words I spoke felt hollow. I felt disconnected from God in a way I had never experienced before. I kept hearing his voice echo in my mind. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And with every repetition, the realization hit harder. I couldn't ignore it. I began to research more about Jesus, his life, his teachings. What I found only deepened my confusion. The more I read, the more I felt a pull, a longing to understand. But each time I came close to the truth, I felt the weight of my past bearing down on me. How could I, an imam, a leader of my people, embrace a truth that would turn my world upside down? I confided in Yusuf, my closest mentor. I thought he would understand, that he would offer the wisdom I so desperately needed. But when I told him about my experience, his face turned pale and his words were filled with anger. "You've lost your way, Khalid," he said, his voice filled with contempt. "Jesus is not the answer. You know this. What you experienced was a delusion, a test. You must repent and return to the faith, or you will be lost forever." I felt the weight of his words crush me. I wanted to argue, to defend what I had seen, but a part of me felt torn. Yusuf was the one who had taught me everything about Islam. How could I go against him? How could I challenge everything I had known? As the days passed, the tension within me grew unbearable. My life had been defined by my faith in Islam, by my commitment to its teachings. But now it felt like I was standing at a precipice, looking into an abyss that I couldn't ignore. Each prayer felt like a betrayal, and every moment away from Jesus felt like a deepening loss. I realized that I was afraid of losing my family, my friends, my community, afraid of what they would say if they knew the truth of what I had experienced. But more than that, I was afraid of what it would mean for my soul. I didn't know where this journey would lead, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't turn back. I couldn't unsee what I had seen, and I couldn't unhear the words he had spoken. The truth had been revealed to me, and now I had to find the courage to embrace it, no matter the cost. The days following my conversation with Yusuf were the hardest of my life. I felt like I was caught in a storm, torn between the love I had for my family and community and the undeniable truth that had been revealed to me. I knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but the weight of the decision was crushing me. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of my study, struggling with the growing tension in my heart, something extraordinary happened. It was around midnight, and the house was still. I had been praying, pleading with God for clarity, for guidance on what to do next. I felt like I was drowning in uncertainty, and just as I was about to give in to the exhaustion of my inner battle, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at this hour. My first thought was that it was a neighbor or someone in need of advice, but when I opened the door, I was stunned to see a man standing there, tall, dressed in white, with a presence that radiated peace. There was an overwhelming sense of calm that washed over me as soon as I laid eyes on him. "I know you are struggling, Khalid," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of authority yet filled with kindness. I froze. "Who are you?" The man smiled gently. "I am the one you met. I am the one who spoke to you when you were dead. I have come to help you find your way." A chill ran through my body. I recognized his voice. It was the same voice from that moment of light. I had never expected a second encounter. "How is this possible?" I stammered. "I don't understand. You're Jesus?" "Yes," he said simply, "and I've come to show you the truth that you are seeking." In that moment, something deep inside me shifted. I had no words, no defense, only a profound sense of awe and wonder. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything, but all I could feel was the certainty that this was not a dream, not a delusion. This was real. Jesus stepped inside my home, and as he did, I felt a wave of peace envelop me. The air seemed to shimmer with his presence, and everything else, the doubts, the confusion, faded into the background. His eyes met mine with an understanding that was both comforting and unsettling. "You are afraid, Khalid," he said, as if reading the depths of my soul. "Afraid of what this truth will cost you. But do not fear, I am with you." I wanted to speak, to ask him so many things, but the words wouldn't come. There were no questions left that mattered. He was the answer. "Why me?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Why are you showing yourself to me?" He looked at me with love in his eyes. "You have been seeking truth, Khalid. You have been searching for me, even when you didn't realize it. I've come to set you free, but freedom comes with a cost." The weight of his words settled into my heart. I understood then that my journey was not just about accepting a new truth. It was about letting go of everything I had known, everything I had built my life upon. "I will follow you," I said, the words coming more easily than I ever imagined they could. "But I don't know how to let go. I don't know how to leave everything behind." Jesus smiled, a look of both tenderness and compassion in his expression. "The way will not be easy, but remember, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. Trust in me, and I will guide you." With that, he stepped closer, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. The moment felt sacred, as if time itself had slowed. And in that silence, I knew everything had changed. The next few days after my encounter with Jesus were like a dream I couldn't wake up from. Amina noticed something was different in me. She had always known when something was off, but now it was as if I had become a different person entirely. I tried to explain to her what had happened, to tell her about the visit from Jesus, but my words faltered. How could I possibly convey what I had experienced? How could I make her understand the profound truth that had shaken me to my core? She listened, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Khalid, you are not well," she said gently, touching my hand. This isn't you. You've always been strong in your faith, in your beliefs. What you're saying, it's not the Islam I know." Her voice trembled, and I could see the pain in her eyes. She was afraid, not just for me, but for us, our family, our life. It was as though she could see the distance growing between us, a gap that had appeared out of nowhere. And perhaps, deep down, I was afraid too, afraid of the cost this truth would demand from us. "I have seen him, Amina. I have seen Jesus," I said, my voice cracking. "And he told me that he is the way. I can't ignore it. I can't go back to the way things were." Amina recoiled as though I had struck her. The shock on her face was like a punch to my gut. Khalid, no. This isn't just a vision or a dream. This is madness. You can't leave Islam. You can't leave us. This isn't real. How can you say these things? Her words cut through me, but I knew they came from a place of fear. Fear of losing me, fear of the unknown. But there was also anger, a fear of betrayal, of me abandoning everything we had built together. She didn't understand that I hadn't chosen this. I hadn't wanted to change my faith, to leave everything behind. But I had encountered a truth so undeniable that it consumed me. I reached out to her, desperate. Amina, please. This is not my choice, it's his. He showed himself to me. I don't know what this means for us, but I know I cannot live in denial anymore. She turned away from me, tears streaming down her face. I don't know who you are anymore, Khalid. I don't know if I can follow you on this path. Those words struck me harder than anything else. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, was now questioning whether she could walk with me. And as much as I wanted to pull her back, to convince her that everything would be okay, deep inside, I knew it wasn't that simple. I turned to my community, hoping for solace, hoping that someone, anyone, could offer the guidance I so desperately needed. But when I shared my story with them, telling them about my encounter with Jesus, they looked at me as though I had lost my mind. Yusuf was the first to speak. "You are being deceived, Khalid," he said, his voice cold. "This is not the way of Islam. You cannot abandon our faith, our tradition, for a false belief. If you persist in this, you will lead yourself and others astray." His words were harsh, filled with judgment, and it stung deeply. I had always respected Yusuf. He had been my mentor, my friend. But now, the very man who had taught me everything was rejecting me, condemning me for embracing what I had come to believe was the truth. My fellow imams turned their backs on me. Some spoke in hushed tones, gossiping behind closed doors, while others outright accused me of heresy. They didn't understand. How could they? I had never imagined such a divide could grow between us. But it was clear. My journey had taken me too far from the faith they knew. There was no turning back. The emotional toll was immense. The more I tried to explain myself, the more isolated I became. I had lost the respect of my peers, and I could feel Amina's heart slipping further away from mine. The weight of their rejection, of their fear, pressed on me like 1,000 pounds. And yet, in the midst of it all, there was a peace within me that I couldn't explain. Jesus had shown me the way, and I knew that he would not abandon me, even if everyone else did. But that didn't make the pain of losing my community, my family, any easier to bear. As I sat alone in my study one night, I asked myself, what now? What would my life look like moving forward? I had no answers, only a sense that the path ahead was as uncertain as it was sacred. But no matter what came, I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had known. I couldn't deny what I had seen, what I had heard. I had to follow the truth wherever it led. The rejection from my family and community was only the beginning. As I ventured further down this path of faith, the challenges I faced multiplied in ways I never could have imagined. I thought the hardest part would be facing the judgment of those closest to me, but the true test came when I realized how much deeper the battle ran, within myself. At first, I found solace in reading the Bible. I started to spend hours in prayer and reflection, seeking answers to questions that plagued me. I was searching for confirmation, for deeper understanding. Jesus had shown me the truth, but my mind still wrestled with the implications. Could I truly leave behind a lifetime of beliefs, a way of life that had defined me, just for this new reality? But it wasn't just the internal struggle. The world outside had its own way of challenging me. I began to lose my position within the community. My role as an imam was revoked. The elders no longer looked at me as a leader. They spoke in hushed tones, avoiding me as if I carried some sort of contagious sickness. The shame of their rejection weighed heavily on me, but there was something even more painful, seeing the disappointment in my mother's eyes. She was the one who had always been so proud of me. To her, I was the son who would uphold the family's honor, who would carry the torch of our faith. And yet now, as I sat across from her, I saw only sorrow. "Khalid," she said one evening, her voice quivering, "what has happened to you? Why this madness? How can you turn away from everything we have taught you, everything we have believed in?" Her words struck me to the core. I had always wanted to make her proud, but now it felt like I had shattered her world. She too was afraid of what my conversion meant, not just for me, but for her. If I followed Jesus, what did it say about the life she had given me? What would our community think? "I have found the truth, Mother," I said softly, trying to hold back my own tears. "And I cannot ignore it. I know this hurts you, but I need you to understand. Jesus is real. He is the way to salvation." But my words were like poison to her. She refused to listen, shaking her head in disbelief. "You are my son, Khalid. You are the light of my life. But this is not the son I raised. This is not who you are. Please, return to us. Return to the faith." Her pleas, laced with a mother's desperation, only deepened the torment in my heart. I had been torn from her, from my community, from everything I had known, and now it seemed I was losing the most important person in my life. But there was more. The whispers had started among my old friends. Friends I had once prayed with, studied with. They now avoided me, their eyes filled with pity, disappointment, or outright anger. The isolation was suffocating. I had been branded a heretic, a traitor to my faith, and those who once respected me now saw me as someone to be feared. One evening, I received a call from Ali, an old friend from the mosque. He was angry, his voice shaking with emotion. "Khalid, I can't believe this. You're following lies. This Jesus, he's a false prophet. Do you really want to throw away everything you've built for this? For a lie?" I stood silent, feeling the sting of his words. "Ali, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm gaining the truth. I'm following the one who has revealed himself to me." "Stop this madness," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "You're dragging us all down with you. This isn't who you are. You're losing your way." I felt the weight of his anger pressing on me. The pain of seeing him, someone I once called my brother, turn his back on me was unbearable. He couldn't see what I had seen, couldn't feel the truth that burned inside me. But I knew this was a test of my faith. If I truly believed in what I had experienced, I had to stand firm, no matter the cost. The attacks from all sides continued, but what hurt the most was the growing tension with Amina. She hadn't said a word to me in days. Her silence was more painful than any argument. I could feel her drifting further away, and the love I had once shared with her felt like a distant memory. She was losing faith in me, in us, and the weight of her disappointment became almost too much to bear. I knew I had to make a choice. Either I could let the voices around me drown out the truth I had experienced, or I could stand firm in my faith, regardless of the consequences. But the price of standing firm was becoming clearer with each passing day. It wasn't just the loss of family or community, it was the loss of everything I had known. The weight of my decisions had become too much to bear, and as I sat alone in my room one night, I couldn't help but wonder if it was all worth it. The isolation had grown unbearable. Every glance from Amina, every word from my family, every rejection from my community, it all felt like a constant reminder that the path I had chosen had set me on a course of loss. I was not the man I had been before. I couldn't pretend I was anymore. I tried to reach out to Amina one more time, hoping that somehow I could bridge the chasm that had formed between us. The silence between us had become deafening, and I could no longer stand the thought of losing her for good. She was sitting on the couch, her head buried in her hands. Her sadness had become a permanent shadow over our home. When I sat beside her, she didn't look up. "Amina," I whispered, my voice heavy with regret. "Please, can we talk?" She didn't respond immediately. Her silence was louder than any argument we could have had. I reached for her hand, and this time, she let me. "I don't know what to say anymore, Khalid," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to be with you when you're becoming someone else, someone I don't recognize." Her words were like a knife through my chest. I had always been her partner, her equal. Now, it felt as if I was a stranger to her. "Amina, I'm still the same person. I've found something, someone that I can't deny. Jesus has changed me. I can't ignore him. I'm sorry, but I can't pretend this isn't real." She pulled her hand away, a tear slipping down her cheek. "And what about us, Khalid? What about our family? What about the life we built together?" My heart ached for her. I wanted nothing more than to make things right, to turn back time, to somehow keep our family whole. But I knew I couldn't go back. The truth had a grip on me that I could no longer deny. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to choose this over you, I said, my voice trembling. But I can't live a lie anymore. I have to follow Jesus, and I need you to understand that. She shook her head, pulling away from me. I don't know if I can understand, Khalid. This is not just about you. It's about everything I believed in, everything I thought we believed in. I don't know if I can be with someone who doesn't share the same faith anymore. I felt as if the ground had slipped out from under me. The pain of losing her, of realizing that our paths were no longer aligned, was almost too much to bear. But I knew I had to make a choice. The struggle wasn't just with Amina. The community's rejection had grown fiercer. Rumors spread quickly, and whispers followed me wherever I went. One day, I was approached by a group of old friends from the mosque. They had come to help me, but I could see the anger in their eyes. Khalid, you are lost, one of them said, his voice harsh. You have abandoned everything we taught you. We're here to help you come back to the truth. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. I had always respected these men. We had shared so many moments of prayer and study together. And now they looked at me with disdain, with the same rejection I had felt from my own family. But I knew deep down that I couldn't return to the faith that had once seemed so certain to me. You don't understand, I said softly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. This is not a choice I made lightly. I didn't abandon anything. I found the truth. I found Jesus, and He is the way, the truth, and the life. I can't go back to the life I had before. They exchanged looks, their expressions a mix of confusion and anger. You are deceived, Khalid, one of them spat. You're bringing shame on us all. This is not the way. You are lost, and you need to come back to the truth before it's too late. Their words stung, but I stood firm. I knew this was the price I had to pay. If I truly believed in what I had seen, what I had experienced, then I had to be willing to lose everything. And yet, even in the midst of their rejection, I couldn't deny the peace that remained in my heart. That peace didn't mean the struggle was over, though. There was a constant battle inside of me. Doubts would creep in at night when I was alone in my thoughts. Was I truly on the right path? Had I made the right decision? The world outside seemed to scream at me to turn back, to give up, to return to what was familiar. But the truth I had encountered was undeniable. Amina's silence, my community's rejection, they were the trials of my faith. The emotional turmoil was relentless. Every step forward felt like it came at a cost, but I knew that this was part of the journey. The cost of following Jesus was high, but the peace and freedom I felt in my heart made it worth it. And as the days went on, I found myself relying more and more on the strength of the truth that had set me free. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew that I couldn't walk it alone. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of my choices grew heavier with each passing moment. I tried to remain steadfast in my faith, but the tension around me had reached a boiling point. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of the cost of my decision, the sacrifices that were now a part of my daily life. My old friends no longer spoke to me, and I saw them in the streets only from a distance. Their eyes were filled with disdain, and the whispers followed me wherever I went. Amina and I barely spoke anymore. The distance between us was palpable, and I could feel her pulling away more and more with every conversation we had. She had stopped coming to me for comfort, for support. Her silence was a constant ache in my heart. But there was something else, something I hadn't expected, something that was beginning to gnaw at the edges of my peace. A few nights ago, I woke up to a strange dream. I had never been one for visions or dreams of any sort, but this one was different. In the dream, I was walking through a dark and desolate valley, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The air was thick, heavy with an unshakable sense of despair. Suddenly, a figure appeared before me, silhouetted by an unnatural light. The figure was tall, strong, and radiated an aura of warmth and love that felt so familiar yet so overwhelmingly powerful. As I stood frozen in place, the figure spoke to me, its voice soft but commanding. Do not fear, for I am with you. You are not alone on this journey. Your suffering is not in vain. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure extended its hand, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace flood my heart. When I awoke, the dream lingered with me, like a memory I couldn't shake. Was it a sign? Was it confirmation that I was on the right path? The dream stirred something deep within me, a new sense of purpose. I was no longer just a man on a journey. I was a man with a mission, and the weight of that mission was beginning to settle on my shoulders. I knew that there was more to this story than just my own struggle, more to this calling than simply following Jesus. But what was it? What had been revealed to me, and why did it feel like the stakes had suddenly gotten so much higher? As I wrestled with these questions, a new challenge began to emerge. One morning, I received a letter. It was an unexpected message, one that I had never thought I would receive. The letter was from someone I had not seen in years, an old friend from my childhood, someone I had lost touch with when I first committed to my role as an imam. The letter was brief, but its contents shook me to the core. It was a message of warning, a message that threatened to unravel everything I had worked so hard to build. The letter spoke of a shadowy group that had been watching me, observing my every move. They had seen the changes in me, heard the rumors that I had converted to Christianity, and now they were watching with intent. Khalid, the letter read, you are in danger. You are being watched, and your choices have consequences. There are those who will not let this go unnoticed. Do not think you are safe. My heart raced as I read the words over and over again. Who were these people? Why had they taken such an interest in me? The sense of unease that had begun to creep into my mind now intensified. The dream I had, the strange and ominous letter, and the increasing hostility from my community. It all felt like something much bigger than me was unfolding, something beyond my understanding. I couldn't ignore it. I knew that there was a force at work here, something spiritual, something that was pushing me further into the depths of this journey. I was no longer just facing rejection from family and friends. I was being drawn into a spiritual battle, one that I had never anticipated. The tension grew and the questions remained unanswered. What was the purpose of this? Why was I being dragged through this trial? Was this part of a greater plan, or was I merely a pawn in a game I couldn't see? I had no answers, only faith, and yet, with each passing day, I knew I was being tested in ways I hadn't fully understood before. The battle had only just begun. The weeks that followed felt like a blur, days filled with unease, nights spent in prayer, and a growing sense of urgency that I couldn't shake. The dream, the letter, the whispers from the community, it was all becoming too much to ignore. I was not only fighting against my own doubts and fears, but also wrestling with the complexities of my relationships with those closest to me. Amina's distance was now more pronounced. She still lived under the same roof, but it felt as though we were two strangers coexisting in the same space. Her eyes were always clouded with uncertainty, and I could see the cracks in our once strong bond deepening with each passing day. I tried to reach her, but every attempt felt like I was pushing her further away. One evening, after another failed attempt at conversation, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Khalid," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to be with you anymore, not like this." Her words were like a dagger to my heart, but I couldn't blame her. I was no longer the man she had married, the imam she had once looked up to. Now I was someone who had embraced a faith that rejected everything she had known, everything we had built together. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to tear us apart. But this is something I can't walk away from. I'm not asking you to understand, Amina. I just need you to know that I can't live a lie anymore." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts, with the weight of the world pressing down on me. I knew that our relationship was on the brink of collapsing, but I couldn't bring myself to let go of the truth I had found, even if it meant losing everything else. As Amina withdrew further into herself, I found myself reaching out to others. It wasn't much, but I needed to feel connected to someone, to know that there were others who understood the struggle I was going through. It was then that I met someone who would change the course of my journey, someone who would become a crucial part of the story I was living. His name was David. I met him through an online Christian group, a space where people shared their testimonies and offered support to one another. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. But David's message stood out to me. His words were full of compassion and wisdom, and he spoke of a faith that wasn't about rules or rituals, but about a relationship with Jesus. We exchanged messages for days, talking about the struggles we faced, the doubts we both wrestled with. David's encouragement gave me a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. He reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there was a community of believers out there who were facing the same challenges I was. But there was something else about David that caught my attention, something I couldn't ignore. He seemed to know more about my situation than I had told him. He spoke of the dangers I was facing, of the shadows that were following me. He even mentioned the letter I had received, as if he knew about it before I had even told him. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but the more we talked, the more I realized that David wasn't just offering me emotional support. He was somehow involved in this story in a way that went beyond mere friendship. He had insight into my life, into the forces at play that I couldn't explain. "I've been praying for you, Khalid," David said one evening, "and I believe that God has a purpose for you in all of this. There's more to this journey than you realize, more than just your faith. You're being called to something greater, something that will change the lives of others." His words sent a chill down my spine. I had always believed that my journey was about me, about finding the truth for myself. But now, David was suggesting that there was a larger purpose at work, a purpose that extended beyond my personal struggle, a purpose that could affect the lives of others in ways I couldn't yet understand. The more I spoke to David, the more I began to realize that my spiritual awakening wasn't just a matter of personal redemption. It was about something much larger, something that involved not only my faith, but the faith of others around me. I was being drawn into a greater plan, one that was shaping my life in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. Amina's rejection, the hostility from my community, the mysterious threats, it was all leading me somewhere. But where? And what was the purpose of all the suffering I had endured so far? I didn't know the answers yet, but I was beginning to sense that this was only the beginning. The journey was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. As the days wore on, the tension in my life became unbearable. My family's disapproval weighed heavily on me, especially Amina's cold silence. It was becoming increasingly clear that the distance between us was no longer just emotional, it was spiritual. I could feel the fracture widening between us, and there were moments when I feared that I might lose her forever. She had once been my anchor, my support in all things, but now she was pulling away, unable to reconcile the man I was becoming with the man I had once been. It wasn't just Amina. The community that had once been my family was now a battleground. I would walk through the streets of our neighborhood, and people would look at me with suspicion, their eyes narrow and filled with judgment. Some even turned their backs when they saw me coming, as though I were a stranger, someone they no longer recognized. It was clear to me now that I wasn't just leaving behind my old beliefs. I was losing everything: my reputation, my community, my sense of belonging. I had become an outcast, a person who was no longer welcome among those who had once called me a brother. But as much as I felt the sting of rejection, there was also a growing sense of clarity within me. I had experienced a transformation, one that could not be undone. I had seen the truth, and I knew that this journey was no longer about personal gain or comfort. This was about something much greater, something that I could not turn my back on. It was then that the letter arrived, the one that would change everything. The letter was from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in years. His name was Jamal, and we had been close when I was still an imam. He had been a fellow scholar, someone I trusted deeply. We had spent hours together, discussing theology, philosophy, and the nature of faith. We had once shared dreams of building a better future for our community, one rooted in the teachings of Islam. But the letter wasn't about those old dreams. It was about the present, the dangerous present I was now living. "Khalid," it read, "I know what you've done, I know what you've become, and I can't pretend that I haven't heard the rumors. But I also know something else, something I've been hesitant to share. There are forces in play here, forces that are not just interested in your faith, but in your life. They are watching you, Khalid, and they are coming for you. But it's not just you I'm concerned about. It's your family. They are in danger too. Amina, your children, none of them are safe from the consequences of your choices. You have been marked, and it's only a matter of time before they come for you. I can't stand by and let this happen. I've seen the signs, the men who have been following you, the meetings that are happening behind closed doors. These people will stop at nothing to silence you. I'm giving you one chance, Khalid. One chance to turn back. You still have a way out. It's not too late. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The same man who had once shared my dreams of a better future was now warning me of the dangers surrounding me. And he wasn't alone. Others had noticed. Others had been watching me, tracking my every move, my every decision. But it wasn't just the threat of danger that shook me. It was the underlying truth in Jamal's words. This wasn't just about my faith anymore. It was about my family's safety, my children's safety. The very people I loved most were now in the crosshairs of forces I couldn't fully comprehend. I sat in my room, the weight of the letter pressing down on me, and I realized something that terrified me. This was no longer just a spiritual battle. This was a fight for survival, a fight that threatened to tear apart everything I had left, and the stakes had never been higher. Could I abandon everything for this truth I had found? Could I stand firm in my faith, knowing the cost? I had already lost so much, but now the question was, how much more was I willing to lose? The choices before me felt impossible. Walk away from the faith I had embraced, return to the safety of the life I once knew, or continue on this path, knowing that my family could pay the price. In that moment, I felt the full weight of what it meant to follow Jesus. This was no longer just a journey of personal redemption. It was a journey that could cost me everything. I had reached a critical turning point, and now I had to decide which path to take. The decision weighed on me like a burden I couldn't shake. The letter from Jamal had planted a seed of fear deep in my heart, but I also knew that this fear was not just about survival. It was about the truth I had found, the truth that had changed me beyond measure. In those quiet, sleepless hours of the night, I would replay every moment of my journey, every conversation, every struggle, every new revelation. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the truth remained. I could not walk away from it now. Jesus had become a part of me, and I could no longer deny the transformation he had brought to my life. The peace he had given me, the clarity that washed over me during the darkest moments of my spiritual awakening, was undeniable. I knew what was at stake. I knew the risks, but I also knew that I had to move forward. But how could I protect my family? How could I ensure that Amina, my children, and everyone I loved wouldn't bear the brunt of this decision? That night, after reading Jamal's letter for what felt like the 100th time, I did something I never thought I would have the courage to do. I sat Amina down and looked her in the eyes, knowing that this conversation could change everything between us forever. Amina, I began, my voice shaky but determined. I need you to listen to me. I know I've hurt you. I know you felt betrayed by me, and I understand why. But the truth is, I can't go back to who I was. What I've found, what I've discovered, it's the truth I've been searching for my whole life. And it's not just for me, it's for all of us. She didn't say anything at first. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken words and unhealed wounds. You don't understand, Khalid, she said finally, her voice trembling. You've turned your back on everything we've built, on our family, our faith. You've betrayed everything that we are, everything we believed in. I know, Amina, I whispered. I know how hard this is, but this is not a choice I made lightly. This is about something so much bigger than me, and I need you to understand that. I'm not asking you to agree, but I need you to see that I'm doing this because I believe with all my heart that this is the truth, and I'm not going to let fear stop me. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching mine, as if she were looking for something, a sign, a glimmer of the man she had once known. But the truth was, I wasn't that man anymore. I had changed, and I knew that there was no going back. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I don't know if I can be a part of this, but I can't stop you, Khalid. I can't control your choices. That night, Amina and I came to a painful understanding. She couldn't follow me on this path, And while I couldn't abandon the truth that had set me free, I also couldn't ignore the cost of that freedom. I had already lost so much: my community, my reputation, the respect I once commanded. But losing Amina, the love of my life, felt like the greatest sacrifice of all. As the days passed, the tension only escalated. Jamal's warning about the threats closing in on me kept haunting me, but I refused to let fear control me. I had already chosen this path, and I would face the consequences, whatever they may be. Then one evening, as I was returning from a meeting with David, I noticed something strange. A car was parked outside my house, an unfamiliar black sedan with tinted windows. My heart raced as I approached. The air around me seemed thick with tension, as if something was about to unfold, something I couldn't control. As I stepped closer, the door of the car opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with an air of authority that sent a chill down my spine. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "You're Khalid, aren't you?" he said in a low, calm voice, his gaze unyielding. I nodded, my throat dry. "Who are you?" "We need to talk," he replied. "This is bigger than you think. You've made a choice that has consequences. It's time you understood the full weight of what you're involved in." The man's words sent a shiver through me, and for the first time since this journey began, I felt a deep sense of fear creeping into my bones. But in the depths of that fear, I also felt something else, a determination that could not be shaken. I had come this far, and I would not back down. "Tell me what you want," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing within me. The man paused, sizing me up. "It's not what we want, Khalid. It's what you've chosen. You've stepped into something you don't fully understand, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences." At that moment, I realized that my journey had reached a critical point. The forces around me were closing in, and whatever came next, I knew it would be the culmination of everything I had endured. I had no idea what the future held, but I also knew one thing for sure: I could not turn back now. The following days blurred together in a whirlwind of uncertainty and fear. Every moment felt like a countdown, as if the walls were closing in on me, and there was nowhere to hide. The man in the black sedan had left a chilling message, but his presence had only fueled my resolve. I couldn't pretend anymore that this journey wasn't dangerous. I couldn't ignore the threats surrounding me, the ones whispered in dark corners, the ones that hinted at much more than just a difference of belief. It was clear that my life and the lives of those I loved were now at risk. But still, I stood firm. Every day, I felt the weight of my choice pressing down on me, yet there was also a lightness, a strange peace that I couldn't explain. I had found the truth, and no matter how much fear was creeping into my bones, it was a truth I could not abandon. The turning point came one evening when I received a phone call that would forever change the course of my life. It was David, his voice urgent and filled with an emotion I had never heard from him before. "Khalid," he said, "they're coming for you. It's no longer just a warning. This is real. You need to leave, now." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I had been preparing for a confrontation, but nothing could have prepared me for this. They were coming, whoever they were, and I could no longer afford the luxury of waiting. I had to act, and I had to act fast. But even as the reality of the situation sank in, another truth lingered in my mind. The truth that I had embraced Jesus Christ, and that no matter what happened next, He was with me. I had reached a point of spiritual clarity where nothing could shake my faith. I immediately packed what little I could carry, knowing that the moment I left, I might never be able to return. Amina had already made it clear that she couldn't follow me on this journey. I didn't blame her. The cost of this decision had been too great, but the love I had for her remained, even as we walked in opposite directions. As I left the house, I could feel the weight of the decision settling in my chest. This was it. There was no going back. I was stepping into a future that was uncertain, a future filled with risk, but also one filled with hope. The world I had known was gone. My family, my friends, the respect I had once commanded. But in its place was something far more precious, my newfound faith in Jesus. No matter what happened, I knew that the path I had chosen was the right one. The peace that came with that certainty was more valuable than any worldly comfort. I drove through the streets in the dead of night, the headlights of my car illuminating the road ahead. but everything felt dim and distant compared to the light that had entered my soul. I wasn't sure where I was going. I didn't know if I would survive this journey, but for the first time in my life, I felt free. As I drove, I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The years of questioning, the struggles, the painful separation from my family, and the journey that had brought me face to face with the truth of Jesus Christ. I thought about Amina and how much I wished things could have been different, but I also knew that I could not deny the truth that had set me free. The phone call had been a warning, but in my heart, I knew that this was more than a battle for my life. It was a battle for my soul, and no matter the outcome, I would stand firm in the faith that had transformed me. As I drove deeper into the night, I knew that the climax of my journey was just ahead. The forces that sought to stop me were closing in, but so was the promise of peace, grace, and redemption. I had come this far, and I was ready for whatever came next. The night seemed endless. My car sped through the winding roads, each turn pulling me deeper into the unknown. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but one thought anchored me, the truth I had found: Jesus. The peace he had given me was my only refuge, my only certainty in this storm of fear and confusion. Then the headlights caught something. A shadow, lingering just off the road. I barely had time to process it before my heart skipped a beat. 2 men stood in the middle of the street, blocking my path. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt mere feet from them. The men were the ones from the black sedan. I recognized them now. The same cold eyes, the same authoritative presence. They slowly approached my car, their footsteps echoing in the night, as if everything in the world had paused except for the tension between us. I stayed in the car, my grip tight on the steering wheel, but I wasn't sure what to do next. My mind flashed back to the warning from David. They were here. The confrontation I had feared was finally happening. The man from the sedan, the one who had spoken to me before, was now standing by my window. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he stared at me, his gaze intense, searching, as if trying to understand something deeper. "Get out of the car," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at me to drive away, but I knew there was no escape. This was my moment. This was the culmination of everything I had faced, the threats, the choices, the sacrifices. I had to face it now, not with fear, but with the strength I had found in my faith. I opened the door and stepped out, facing the 2 men. The cool night air hit me, but my body was warm with the weight of what had transpired. The man who had spoken to me earlier stepped closer, his gaze never wavering. "You've made your choice," he said, as though he had been waiting for this moment. "But you need to understand something. There's more at stake here than just your life. This is bigger than you." "I understand," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But I've found something greater than myself, a truth that goes beyond what I thought I knew, and I'm not turning back now." He seemed to pause at my words, a flicker of something, maybe respect or hesitation, passing through his eyes. For a moment, the world seemed to slow, and I felt something shift. It was as though a barrier had broken, and the truth that had been so clear to me all this time was now reverberating in the air between us. Then, without warning, one of the men grabbed me by the arm, pulling me toward the black sedan. My body tensed as I struggled to free myself, but the grip was unyielding. "You don't know what you're getting into," the man hissed. I was thrust into the back seat, my mind racing. But as the car began to move, my fear slowly started to fade, replaced by a calm certainty. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. No matter what happened, I was not alone. Jesus was with me. And that truth, that knowledge, was more powerful than anything they could throw at me. The drive felt endless, the car speeding through darkened streets with no clear destination. But in the silence, I knew this was not the end. Whatever came next, whatever danger awaited me, I had already made my choice. I was standing in the light of a truth that would never fade. And then, as if to reinforce my resolve, the words came to me, as clear as the night sky above. "Do not be afraid, I am with you." The car finally stopped. We had arrived at a building, a large, imposing structure that seemed to loom over me. I was pulled from the car, my legs shaky but my resolve solid. They were leading me inside, and I could feel the weight of what was to come. The final confrontation was inevitable, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever happened, whatever came next, I was ready. The cold, sterile walls of the building felt like a tomb. Each step I took echoed loudly in the silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. I was ushered into a room, dimly lit, filled with shadows. My captors stood in the doorway watching me, but I no longer feared them. Something had shifted within me, and though the external dangers were real, I knew that they no longer held dominion over my spirit. As I stood in that room, facing what could have been the end of my journey, I felt an overwhelming peace wash over me. It was the peace of knowing that I had found the truth that transcended everything I had ever known. Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life. No threat, no fear could take that from me. A man entered the room, the one who had spoken to me earlier. His gaze was intense, but I could see something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. I stood tall, my heart resolute, knowing that no matter the outcome, I was ready. "You think this is the truth?" he asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. "That you're willing to die for this?" I looked him in the eye, my voice steady. "Yes, I've found a truth that is bigger than all of us, and I will not deny it, no matter what." He seemed to study me for a moment, the tension in the air thick, and then, to my surprise, he stepped back, lowering his gaze. "I don't understand it," he said softly, almost to himself, "but I see that you believe it, with everything in you." The room was silent for a long time. At that moment, it felt as if everything had come to a standstill. I had no idea what would happen next, but I realized something crucial. This was the culmination of my journey, not just a confrontation with those who opposed me, but a final test of my faith. I had faced the deepest fears of losing everything, family, reputation, security, and yet I stood here unshaken. Then, unexpectedly, the door opened, and I saw David step into the room. The shock on his face was clear, but there was something else there too: hope. His eyes met mine, and in that brief moment, I knew that my journey had reached its conclusion. "Is he?" David began, looking at the men who had brought me here. "Are you going to?" Before I could respond, the man who had led me here waved him off, his expression a mix of exhaustion and resignation. "Let him go. He's already made his choice." David turned to me, his face softening. "Khalid, He stopped himself, clearly grappling with the weight of everything that had happened. I didn't think you'd actually do it." "I had no choice," I said, my voice filled with peace. "The truth is too strong to ignore, and this is not the end, it's the beginning." As I walked out of the building, the cool night air felt different. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The man I had been, the person who was lost in confusion and fear, had died in that room. In his place stood someone who had found his way, someone whose faith in Christ was unwavering, no matter what came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but I no longer feared it. I had left Islam, but more importantly, I had found Jesus. I was free, not because I had escaped, but because I had embraced the truth that set me free. As I drove away from the building, my mind turned to Amina and the family I had left behind. The pain of separation was still fresh, but in my heart, I knew that I had done what I had to do. This was my path now, one of faith, of redemption, of purpose. The road stretched out before me, but I was no longer alone. Jesus was with me, and no matter what came next, I would walk in his light. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. The story of Khalid's transformation is one of sacrifice, faith, and redemption. It's a reminder that, no matter how difficult the path may seem, the truth and the peace we find in Christ are worth any cost. If Khalid's journey has inspired you, I encourage you to reflect on your own beliefs and how they shape your life. No matter where you are in your spiritual journey, the truth is waiting for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message of hope and transformation.